I didn't know it would be the last normal day. Nobody ever does, right? You just wake up thinking you've got 1,000 more mornings ahead of you. I remember the sunlight coming through the kitchen window, that soft, honey-colored kind that makes you think the world's actually a kind place. My brother Daniel was already there, leaning against the counter with a mug in his hand. "You're late," he said, smirking like he was my boss instead of just my brother. I rolled my eyes, rummaging for the coffee tin. Saturday. "Dan, there's no such thing as late." We weren't particularly close, but we had this quiet rhythm, small talk, harmless teasing. That sort of sibling shorthand where you can annoy each other without really meaning it. That morning, it felt safe. I remember the smell of the coffee, the faint hum of the fridge, the scrape of his spoon against the mug as he stirred in too much sugar. We talked about random things, the weather, his work, my plans to finally fix the squeaky door to the backyard. He joked that I'd probably put it off until next year. I told him I'd get to it before he actually paid me back the $50 he'd borrowed last month. We both laughed. In hindsight, it's almost cruel how normal it was. It's how easy. If I had known, maybe I would have looked at him longer, memorized. The details, the way his hair curled over his ears when he needed a haircut. It's the small scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 12. Maybe I would have said something more meaningful than "don't drink all the coffee before I get back." 'Cause here's the thing. You think you've got time? You think you'll have another Sunday, another birthday, another dumb inside joke that only the two of you get? But life doesn't always ask your permission before it changes everything. I left that morning without a second thought. The sun was warm, the air was crisp, and the road ahead seemed endless. I had no idea that within hours, it would all be gone. The sunlight, the coffee, the illusion that my brother was just my brother, and nothing more complicated than that. It's strange how fast a day can unravel. One minute, I was driving with the window cracked, letting the cold air rush in, music low in the background. What? I remember thinking I should call Mom later, just one of those fleeting, harmless thoughts that usually slips away. The sky had that pale, winter blue look, and the sunlight was sharp against the asphalt. The road was nearly empty, just me and a couple of cars spaced far enough apart to feel like I had the world to myself. I remember tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, matching the beat of the song, and then sound. Not just any sound, that sound. The kind that slices through your thoughts and floods your body with panic before you even understand why. Screeching tires, the high-pitched, desperate shriek of rubber on pavement. I turned my head and all I saw was metal, fast, too close. Too late, the impact was violent. Deep, crushing boom that seemed to echo inside my bones. The seatbelt cut into my chest, the steering wheel slammed forward, and for a moment, it was just chaos, glass shattering, the world jerking sideways, my body weightless and heavy all at once. Then, stillness. I could feel the cold air pouring. In through the broken window, my ears rang with this high, piercing tone, drowning out everything else. Somewhere far away, a car horn blared and wouldn't stop. My vision blurred, like someone smeared water across a painting. I remember trying to move my fingers, but they felt like stone. My head lolled to the side, and I caught a glimpse of a hand, someone's hand reaching toward me. There were voices, muffled and frantic, like they were speaking through water, and then the lights seemed to dim. Not all at once. Faded slowly, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. My thoughts slowed too, collapsing into one last flicker. This can't be it. This can't be where my story ends. But then there was nothing. No sound, no light, no pain. Just nothing. At first I thought I was dead. Because if I wasn't, then where was I? There was no light. Not at first. No shapes, no ceiling, no faces. Just sound faint and far away. Like I was at the bottom of a swimming pool, and the world was happening somewhere above the surface. Beeping. The rhythmic kind that felt steady, almost hypnotic. And then voices. I couldn't tell who they belonged to at first. They were just there, floating in and out, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp. A nurse maybe, her tone brisk but kind. Another voice, male, deeper, the words blurred, but I could hear the weight in them. It took me a while to realize I was still here, in my body, but it was like being trapped inside a house where every door was locked and every window was sealed shut. I could hear the footsteps on the floor above me, the laughter, the crying, but I couldn't climb the stairs to join them. Every now and then, light would bleed in through the darkness, brief moments where I could almost see blurry shapes, a ceiling light haloed in white, the corner of a curtain swaying. Then it would fade again, and I'd be back in the dark. I wanted to scream. God, I wanted to scream, to tell someone, I'm here. I can hear you. Don't talk about me like I'm gone. But my body didn't get the message. My lips wouldn't move, my hands wouldn't twitch, my eyelids wouldn't lift. Time was strange there. It didn't move in hours or days, just in visits. The rise and fall of conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. The clink of a water cup on the side table, the shifting weight on the mattress when someone sat beside me. Sometimes I thought I felt a hand on mine, warm, familiar. Those were the moments I fought hardest to wake up, to push through the heavy, suffocating fog. But no matter how much I tried, I stayed locked inside myself. And that's when I realized the most terrifying part. This wasn't death. This was being alive, but powerless. I remember the first time I heard his voice. Not just any voice. His voice, Daniel, my brother. It cut through the fog like a warm knife. And for a moment I thought, thank God I'm not alone. His tone was low, almost careful. I could hear the faint scrape of the chair legs against the hospital floor as he sat. Down. Hey. It's me, he said. You're a tough one. You know that? I wanted to cry, to tell him I could hear him, that his voice was a lifeline in the middle of all this darkness. For a while, he just talked about normal things. His job, some TV show he was watching, the weather. He even made a joke about how the nurses were probably sick of seeing his face every day. I soaked it in like sunlight, but then, the shift, it was subtle at first. The sound of him leaning back, his voice dropping lower, not the soft kind of low you use when you're comforting someone. No. This was the kind of low you use when you're talking about something you don't want overheard. I've been talking to the lawyer, he said. The words didn't register right away. They floated in, meaningless at first. But then, he kept going, they said. Well, if you don't make it, we'd have to deal with the inheritance, the house, the accounts. I've been thinking. It might be easier to just get things sorted. Now, double quotes, easier. That word hit me like a second accident. I wanted to scream, what are you talking about? I'm right here, but my mouth didn't move. My eyes didn't open. All I could do was lie there while his voice kept spilling out like poison. He talked about transferring things early, about avoiding complications later. And the whole time, my mind was trying to reconcile the image of my brother, the same guy who used to share cereal with me on Saturday mornings, with the man planning my financial funeral before I'd even taken my last breath. I'd always thought betrayal would feel sharp, sudden, but this was different. It was slow, heavy, like sinking into cold water and realizing you can't reach the surface. By the time he left that day, I didn't know what hurt more, the accident that had put me here, or the realization that maybe I'd been wrong about who my brother really was. Time in a coma isn't measured in days or nights. It's measured in visits, in footsteps, in voices. After that first conversation, I started listening differently, not with hope, but with the quiet, gnawing dread of someone who knows a secret they wish they didn't taint out came often. Always alone at first. His voice would start casual updates about his week, comments about the weather, but inevitably, it would drift, lower, sharper, and then the calls would start. I could hear the faint buzz of his phone, the click. As he answered, his tone would change like flipping a switch. Yeah, I've already spoken to the lawyer. Oh, no. They said it's possible to get early access. If his words would blur, but the meaning didn't need filling in. Sometimes it was about the house. Sometimes the savings. Once he even mentioned selling Dad's watch, the one he'd promised to keep safe. Each time my chest felt tighter, but not from the injuries. This was a different kind of pain. Kind that came from knowing you were being erased piece by piece while you were still alive. There were others too. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Their voices had that syrupy-sweet tone people use when they're pretending to care. Oh, poor thing. Must be so hard for you, Daniel. And then, softer, so. What happens to the money if always if? The hospital was quiet at night. It's quiet, the kind where every sound stands out. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoes, the hiss of the oxygen. And in that silence, my brother's whispered conversations felt like gunshots. I became a witness. To my own undoing, couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't fight. All I could do was lie there while my life was being dismantled one phone call at a time. It's a special kind of torture. Hearing the people you trusted most carve up your future while you're still fighting to hold on to it. And the worst part? They all thought I was gone. They didn't know I was in the room with them. The whole time. It didn't happen all at once. Movies make it look like you just open your eyes and sit up, gasping for air. But in reality it's slower, stranger. The first thing was my hand. Just the faintest twitch in my right fingers. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then it happened again, a small, stubborn spark firing through a body that had been silent for too long. The next day, I felt my lips. Try to move. Not much. Just a tremor. But enough to remind me I was still here, still capable of something. That small victory lit a fuse inside me. Light came next. A soft, blinding blur that seeped in under my eyelids. It hurt at first, stabbing into the darkness I'd been living in for what felt like forever. Shapes started forming the white. Ceiling tiles, the curtain rail, the shadow of someone moving nearby. And then I saw him, Daniel, sitting in the same chair by the bed, phone in hand. His face lit up when he noticed my eyes flutter. "You're awake," he said, smiling. But it wasn't the pure, relieved smile you'd expect from a brother who almost lost his sibling. No, it was careful, controlled, like he was calculating what this meant for him. I wanted that moment to feel like triumph, like the ending of a nightmare. But the truth was, the nightmare was still sitting right there in front of me, because I remembered every word, every plan, every lie. I managed to squeeze his hand just enough to make it look like gratitude. Inside, my thoughts were sharper. You don't know that I know. The nurses came in, voices bright and fussing over vitals, checking my pupils, adjusting the bed. But even as I blinked against the light and tried to form my first hoarse words, I kept my eyes on him, watching the way his jaw tightened, the way his thumb tapped nervously against his phone. My body was weak, but my mind was awake, and I wasn't about to waste that. Everyone expected me to be confused when I woke up, and I was, but not in the way they thought. The nurses said it was normal. Memory gaps, disorientation, the fog that comes with trauma. Daniel latched onto that like a lifeline. "You probably don't remember much from before," he told me one afternoon. His tone, almost casual. I smiled weakly and said, "Not really. Just bits and pieces." It was a lie, of course. I remembered everything, and that was my advantage. See, anger is loud. Anger makes you slip up. But silence. Silence can be sharp enough to cut without leaving a mark. So I played the part. Grateful little sister, slowly recovering, smiling at her doting brother who stuck by her side through it all. I let him bring me coffee. I listened to him talk about how stressful things had been, how much paperwork he'd had to deal with. I even nodded sympathetically when he complained about certain relatives asking too many questions. Inside, I was cataloging every word, every glance, every deflection when I asked about bills or the house at night when the room was dim. And the hallway outside was quiet. I'd pretend to drift off while he sat scrolling on his phone. Sometimes I caught his reflection in the dark glass of the window, the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw worked when he was deep in thought. I started noticing patterns, the way his visits got shorter when certain calls came in, the way he avoided talking about finances if a nurse was in the room. He thought I was weak. He thought I was still half asleep. But I was wide awake now, and I wasn't going to waste the only weapon I had. Patience. It was almost funny. In a twisted way. He didn't realize that the longer I stayed quiet, the more rope he gave me to pull later, and I was willing to wait. The body heals slowly. The mind even slower. But every day I pushed. It started small, squeezing a stress ball, moving from bed to chair, taking those first unsteady steps down the hospital hallway with a walker. The pain was constant, but so was the fire under it. I wasn't just learning to walk again. I was learning how to stand without him. Daniel still visited, still played the part of the concerned brother. I still smiled, still let him believe I remembered nothing. But in the spaces between his visits, I started working. One of the nurses, a quiet woman named Claire, slipped me my phone when I was strong enough to hold it. She thought I wanted to scroll social media. Old friends? Distant relatives? People Daniel had probably assumed would stay out of the picture. I asked questions, careful ones, about paperwork, about Dad's watch, about certain arrangements I knew he'd made, and slowly a picture began to form. Bank accounts closed. Assets shifted, signatures forged or coerced. When I was discharged, I didn't go back to my house right away. Went to a friend's apartment instead, someone Daniel hadn't spoken to in years, gave me space, privacy, a place to make calls without his shadow hanging over me. Rehab was grueling. My legs trembled after 10 minutes on the treadmill. My arms ached from lifting weights a child could manage. Every time I thought about quitting, I pictured him selling off my life piece by piece. I kept going. I met with a lawyer. Quietly, without fanfare. I signed documents, filed notices, changed account passwords. It felt good, putting things in my name again, claiming pieces of myself he didn't even know he'd lost yet. The first time I walked outside without assistance, the air felt different. Crisp, alive. My legs shook, but my steps were steady. Daniel still thought I was his sleeping sister. Grateful for his help, what he didn't know was that I was building something behind the curtain, something he wouldn't see coming until it was too late. It didn't happen in a courtroom. There was no shouting, no dramatic finger-pointing, no public scene. That would have given him too much dignity, a stage to defend himself. Instead, it happened with a letter. Weeks of quiet work had led to this moment. Meetings with my lawyer, statements from witnesses, copies of bank transactions, every document neat, undeniable, and signed in black ink. The kind of evidence that didn't just tell a story, it nailed it to the wall. I had the letter delivered to him on a Thursday morning. No warning, no phone call. Just a plain envelope. My name in the corner, sitting in his mailbox like it was any other piece of mail. I wasn't there to see him open it, but I didn't need to be. I could imagine it, his casual flick of the envelope opener, the smirk he probably had before the first page even came out, and then the shift. The exact moment his eyes caught the words fraudulent transfer and legal restitution. I pictured his face tightening, his heartbeat stuttering, the confidence draining out of him as he flipped through page after page of proof. My proof, until there was nothing left to deny. By the time he reached the end, he would have seen the line that mattered most. Failure to comply will result in full legal proceedings, no threats, no emotion. Just fact. I didn't hear from him that day or the next. But I got confirmation from my lawyer that the accounts were being returned. The property paperwork voided. Quietly, efficiently. He wasn't going to fight it, not because he'd suddenly grown a conscience, but because he knew he'd lose. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to confront him in person. The truth was in the paper, and the paper didn't care about his excuses. Some victories don't look like fireworks. Some look like silence, the kind that follows a storm after it's already washed everything away. The funny thing about waking up is, you never really go back to sleep the same way again. In the weeks after it was over, I caught myself thinking about the accident less, and about Daniel even less than that. Not because I'd forgiven him. Forgiveness is a gift, and he'd never earned it, but because I refused to give him space in my head anymore. The money came back. The house stayed mine. The accounts were secured. But those were just things. What I really got back was something harder to name. The part of me that knew I could survive what I'd thought was unthinkable. People asked if I'd speak to him again. The answer was simple. No, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, especially when you know the other side would burn it again if given the chance. I kept the hospital wristband, not as some morbid reminder, but as proof. Proof that I'd been there, that I'd come back, and that I'd walked away not just alive, but awake in a way I'd never been before.
One morning, I slipped it into my pocket and stepped outside. The sun was warm, the air crisp, not so different from the last morning before the accident.
But this time, the light felt different. Brighter, more honest. I walked down the sidewalk with no destination in mind, just the steady rhythm of my feet and the weight of the past falling behind me with every step. No bitterness. No revenge fantasies. Just the quiet certainty that my life was mine again. And somewhere. Daniel was dealing with the silence I'd left behind. That was enough.